Okay, let's untack this. Imagine reaching for like a common bottle of pain reliever,
Yeah.
something you might have in your own medicine cabinet right now, expecting relief, maybe just a bit of help with a headache or, a cold.
700 stuff.
But instead, it brings terror and death. That's exactly what happened in the Chicago area back in the fall of 1982.
It's such a chilling premise, isn't it? Because it turns something utterly mundane, something everyone just trusted, into a silent, indiscriminate weapon.
Yeah.
You got 7 people, seemingly random strangers, a child, new parents, a flight attendant, all linked by one horrifying detail.
They'd all recently taken extra-strength Tylenol capsules.
Exactly.
And that horrific discovery, well, it didn't just shock a community. It kicked off one of the largest and still maybe one of the most enduringly mysterious criminal investigations in U.S. history, the Tylenol Murders.
Right. And with that recent Netflix docuseries, Cold Case, the Tylenol Murders, revisiting it all, it really feels like the right time for a deep dive.
Absolutely. So our mission for you today, using the sources we have, articles looking back, investigative reports, insights from that documentary, is to cut through the noise a bit.
Yeah, we want to unpack the details of what actually happened, explore the really complex picture of the primary suspect, look at the huge corporate response.
And, crucially, show you the lasting impact this case has had on your daily life, probably in ways you've never even stopped to consider. Think of this as your shortcut, kind of, to understanding this whole complex event. We'll grab the most surprising facts, the crucial insights that jump out from the source material.
Okay, so where do we start? The beginning.
Let's just jump right into the immediate horror of those first few days. It's intense.
It began so tragically, almost, quietly. In a suburb of Chicago, the first known victim was just 12 years old. Mary Tellerman from Elk Grove Village.
Let me 12.
Yeah. The sources tell us she woke up with a cold, took a Tylenol. Just hours later, she collapsed and died.
And the horror, it didn't stop there, did it?
No. On the very same day, maybe less than 10 miles away, you have Adam Janus, a postal worker. He died after taking Tylenol for some chest pain.
But his story gets even worse, doesn't it? The family connection.
Oh, it's particularly heartbreaking, and the sources really emphasize this. While his family was gathered, actually mourning Adam, his brother Stanley, and Stanley's wife Teresa.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they both took Tylenol from the same bottle for headaches, probably from the stress,
Understandable, tragically.
And they both collapsed. Both died later that day. 3 deaths, 1 family, 1 bottle.
Unbelievable. And the cluster just kept growing.
It did. There was Mary Reiner, only 27, a new mother just home after giving birth to her 4th child. Paula Prince, 35, a flight attendant found dead in her Chicago apartment, Tylenol bottle nearby.
And the sources mentioned that paramedics at Paula Prince's scene were worried about cyanide exposure themselves.
Yeah, the levels detected were apparently that high. It was a real concern. And then there was Mary McFarland, 31, who collapsed at work after taking a Tylenol.
7 deaths, all linked by
potassium cyanide. The capsules they had taken were laced with it. And the sources highlight the sheer scale of cyanide found in those tainted bottles for, well, thousands of fatal doses.
Thousands. Wow. And here's a chilling point the documentary brings up, right? There could have been more victims.
Exactly. Especially among the elderly. Because back then, cyanide testing wasn't standard in autopsies unless poisoning was specifically suspected.
So someone could have died. It looked like natural causes, maybe a heart attack, and nobody would have tested for cyanide.
Precisely. So some potential cases might just never have been connected to the Tylenol at all.
So how did they make the connection? It wasn't immediate, was it?
No. Initially, doctors were baffled. These sudden deaths, flu-like symptoms. Poisoning wasn't the first thought. The breakthrough, according to the sources, came from a nurse, Helen Jensen.
Right, she was visiting the Janus home.
Yes, and she noticed something just odd about that Tylenol bottle. 6 capsules were missing. She flagged it to the authorities.
And that small detail.
It became the thread that basically unraveled everything. It led investigators to look much closer at the bottles themselves.
When they did look closer, what did they find? The capsules themselves.
They found really revealing signs. The sources describe these distinct brown rings inside the tampered capsules.
From the cyanide.
Yeah, clear signs of cyanide corrosion. It showed the capsules had definitely been pulled apart, the original medicine dumped out, and then refilled with the poison.
So the focus must have immediately gone to the manufacturing plants.
Initially, yes. Could it have happened there? The contaminated pills came from 2 different places, one near Philly, one in Texas.
Okay.
But the investigations at both plants They found no evidence of large-scale cyanide tampering. Nothing looked amiss there.
So that led to a different conclusion.
It was the critical realization, the pivot point for the whole investigation. The tampering almost certainly occurred after the product left the factory.
On store shelves.
Exactly. Sitting on shelves in various Chicago area drugstores, someone was going into stores, taking bottles, tampering, and putting them back.
And realizing that must have just sparked immediate panic.
Oh, widespread panic. It gripped Chicago first, then just spread across the entire country like wildfire.
You can even see it affecting things like Halloween that year, right? Parents terrified about poison candy.
Absolutely. It was a direct echo of the Tylenol fear, a loss of trust in everyday things.
And the public health response must have been huge.
Swift and urgent. Authorities took steps you just had a theme before, going door to door, using loudspeakers in neighborhoods.
Wow.
Urging residents, stop using Tylenol, any Tylenol products, immediately.
And Johnson & Johnson, the makers, they're suddenly facing this unimaginable crisis.
Yeah, internally, the sources say there was immense fear, potential responsibility for what was, at the time, their single most profitable product.
Huge stakes.
Massive. And their reaction became historic. The Illinois Attorney General basically told them to stop selling Tylenol in the state.
Which led to the recall.
The largest consumer product recall in history up to that point. Millions and millions of bottles pulled from shelves nationwide.
But initially, the investigation itself was struggling.
Hit major roadblocks. The sources are clear on this. There was just a lack of obvious leads.
Right.
No clear connection between the victims apart from the Tylenol. No witnesses seeing anyone tampering in stores. And no clear motive. Why do this? It was a complete mystery.
Okay, so here's where it gets, well, really interesting. The turning point.
The extortion letter. 7 days after the first murders, Johnson & Johnson gets this letter.
Demanding money.
$1 million. And threatening more killings if the money wasn't deposited into a specific bank account fast.
So suddenly there's a potential motive. Extortion.
Right. It made it seem less random, potentially using murder as leverage. And crucially, the letter writer showed specific knowledge about poison, how it worked.
Which suggests they were involved.
Or knew who was. So they followed the money trail, the bank account, traced it back to a travel agency. And the owner there mentioned having this volatile dispute with a guy named Robert Richardson, who was the husband of one of his employees.
And the letter.
Employees at the agency noticed the handwriting on the extortion letter looked incredibly similar to this Robert Richardson's writing.
Handwriting experts confirmed it.
Confirmed. Identical. So authorities tracked down Robert Richardson, partly using a photo published with something he'd written.
And here's that amazing detail from the sources. A former cop recognized him.
Yeah, a former police sergeant, David Barton. He saw the photo and apparently just exclaimed, "God damn it, that's not Robert Richardson, that's James Lewis."
Boom. James Lewis enters the picture.
And becomes the prime suspect. The sources paint this picture of a, well, deeply troubled individual, significant criminal history.
Like the 1978 murder charge.
Exactly. In Kansas City, the victim's dismembered remains were found, but that case got dismissed because of an illegal search.
And there were later charges, too.
Yeah, 2004, rape and kidnapping charges, also dismissed, apparently because the victim refused to testify right before the trial.
So, a complicated past.
Yeah.
And they described him as a chameleon.
That's the word used in the sources. Use at least 20 different aliases, bounce between jobs, tax consultant, computer guy, salesman. Hard to pin down.
And what's really striking, especially reading accounts that mention the Netflix docuseries, is his appearance in it. He denies everything.
Flat out denies involvement in the murders, says, I wouldn't hurt anybody. But then in the same documentary, he gives this incredibly detailed, almost step-by-step account of exactly how the killer might have done it.
Like he's mapping it out.
It's unsettling, like writing a script for the crime he says he didn't commit.
So what was he actually charged with in relation to this case?
Only the extortion, linked to that letter he sent J&J. He was convicted for that.
And served time.
Over 12 years in federal prison, his story, apparently, was that the letter was just some bizarre attempt to frame someone else he hated.
But, and this is the crucial, frustrating part, right? Never charged with the actual murders.
Never. And the reason, according to all the sources, is that investigators just couldn't definitively place him in the Chicago area when the poisonings happened.
He claimed he was somewhere else.
Claimed he was in New York City. And even though they found drafts of extortion letters, a book about poisons in his home, It just wasn't enough for prosecutors to directly link him to the act of lacing those pills in Chicago stores.
But the FBI didn't completely let it go.
No, they revisited the case in 2009, searched his property again, and the sources note they even re-interviewed him as recently as 2022.
And Lewis passed away when?
Just last year, 2023, age 76, taking whatever secrets he had with him.
And that scene in the documentary with the modern Tylenol bottle, that really sticks with you.
Oh yeah, where he's examining the safety seals, testing them with his fingernails.
It makes that weird comment about people swearing his name when they struggle to open bottles now.
It's a really chilling, strange moment. Playful, almost, but deeply unsettling given the context.
Now, okay, shifting focus a bit. Johnson & Johnson's handling of the crisis, it's often held up as like a textbook example of good corporate responsibility, right?
Yeah.
The recall, the transparency.
It often is, yes. But the sources, particularly the perspective you see in the documentary, do raise some important questions about their role, especially during the investigation.
Yeah, this point really stood out to me. J&J initially denied having any cyanide in their plants. Flat out denied it.
Right, but the documentary apparently reveals internal documents showing that wasn't true. Cyanide was used in their quality control tests.
And critically, near the assembly area where the Tylenol was actually made.
That's the key point raised, near the production line.
So that denial looks problematic in hindsight.
It does raise questions, and also because J&J did so much of the initial investigation themselves, tracking lots, distribution, checking their own facilities.
Right, they had all the internal data.
Exactly. But some sources question if that created a potential conflict of interest, given the massive financial stake they had in clearing their own production process.
Makes sense. And what about destroying the recalled capsules?
That's another point raised. Millions of capsules were destroyed, primarily for public safety, obviously.
Sure.
But some argue that might have destroyed crucial evidence, hindering the criminal investigation. Who knows what trace evidence might have been lost?
And FBI interviews with J&J execs are still under seal.
Reportedly, yes, even today, which just adds another layer of question marks, I suppose.
So what's J&J's official position on all this?
Well, as the sources report, they were later found not liable in a subsequent separate tampering case, and they did settle with the families of the Chicago victims back in '91.
For an undisclosed amount.
Undisclosed sum, yes, but crucially without admitting any liability. Their stance, according to a spokesman at the time, was about wanting to do something for the families and finally get this tragic event behind us. They maintained they couldn't have predicted or prevented the criminal tampering that happened outside their control, on store shelves.
Okay. But the story, it didn't quite end in '82, did it? There was another incident.
That's right. 4 years later, 1986, Diane Ellsworth died in Yonkers, New York, also from cyanide-laced Tylenol.
And this was after J&J had put the first safety seals on the bottles.
Yes, that's the really disturbing part. After those initial seals were implemented,
And they found other tampered bottles, too.
adding to the complexity, yeah, 2 other sealed poison bottles from the same lot were found in a nearby pharmacy during that Yonkers investigation.
Which just throws everything up in the air again, doesn't it?
It raised huge questions. Did it suggest tampering before the product left the factory, somehow bypassing the seals? Or was it someone else entirely, maybe copying the Chicago method, or even multiple unrelated perpetrators? It really complicated the narrative that Lewis was the sole possibility.
But, okay, despite all these lingering questions, the frustrating mystery of who actually did it, the sources are crystal clear about one thing: the massive impact this had on safety.
Oh, absolutely revolutionary. It fundamentally changed consumer product safety across the board, pharmaceuticals, food, everything.
Companies everywhere just started adopting tamper-proof packaging.
Instantly. J&J really led the charge with Tylenol itself. They brought in those 3-part safety seals you still sort of see variations of today.
Like the glued box.
Glued box, the tight plastic neck seal over the cap, and then that strong foil seal you have to puncture over the bottle mouth.
And they introduced the caplet too, right? Harder to tamper with.
Exactly, a solid pill. Much harder to pull apart and refill compared to those old 2-part capsules.
Wasn't there actual legislation that came out of this?
Yes, directly because of this crisis. Congress passed the 1983 Tylenol bill, made product tampering a serious federal crime. Heavy penalties.
So this is maybe the most direct, undeniable legacy, isn't it? The thing that affects all of us.
Every single day. Think about your kitchen, your medicine cabinet right now. Every single tamper-proof seal you see on pills, juice bottles, peanut butter jars, you name it.
It's because of this.
Every single one is a direct result of the Tylenol murders in 1982. This case permanently reshaped how products are packaged and sold and how you interact with them safely.
So here we are, decades later, massive investigation, years of work, and the actual person, or maybe people, who put the poison in those first capsules.
Never identified, never apprehended, still unsolved.
It's just so chilling because it's so unique, isn't it? As the sources say, no motive, no contact.
Exactly. And the murder weapon was, as they put it, basically the most everyday thing that you can think of. A trusted pain reliever. Turn against random strangers.
There's always that hope, I guess, that renewed attention, like from this documentary, might shake something loose. A fresh look at old evidence, maybe new technology.
Maybe. You hope someone, somewhere knows something. Or maybe a new connection is made.
So summing up this deep dive, we've seen a crime that seemed almost designed to be unsolvable. Sparked nationwide panic, put a huge corporation on the ropes.
Yeah, centered on this really compelling, complex suspect who was never actually convicted of the murders themselves.
And yet, despite no closure on who did it, it permanently changed consumer safety for literally everyone.
A truly bizarre and tragic legacy.
It really makes you think, though, about the layers here, the question's still hanging. Given how unique this crime was, no clear motive, random victims, and all the unresolved questions, especially around James Lewis, do you think that intense focus on him, on that one suspect, ultimately helped? Or maybe did it actually hinder finding the ultimate truth? Did it stop investigators looking elsewhere? Maybe. Something to ponder.